The case file was 23 years old, and the handwriting in the margins looked exactly like mine. Not similar, not close. Mine. The same slanted capital letters I've used since I was a rookie, sitting in a folder that predates my badge by a decade. I told myself it was a coincidence. I've told myself worse and believed it longer. This is case file 4471, the disappearance of a woman named Mara Lindqvist, 23 years cold, reassigned to me last month because I asked for it. I don't fully know why I asked for it. That should have been my first clue. My captain didn't want to hand it over. Cold cases stay cold for a reason, he told me, and this one had already broken one detective's career before it broke his retirement. I said I had a hunch. He let me have the file anyway, the way captains do once they've stopped asking veteran detectives to explain their hunches out loud. My partner asked me the same question a different way. What pulls someone toward a 23-year-old file with no leads left and no family left to call? I didn't have an answer for him then. I do now. Let me back up, the way I would for any file that isn't mine, and pretend for a minute that it isn't. Mara Lindqvist vanished on a Tuesday in early October. No body, no confirmed sighting since. A motel registration under her name, a half-emptied bank account, a car found parked and locked 3 towns over with the keys still in the ignition. Standard runaway pattern, the original detective wrote, if you assume she wanted to disappear. He closed the file 2 years later, unsolved, presumed voluntary. He's been dead since I was 26. So whose hand wrote that second set of notes in the margin, dated 6 years after his own death? I sat with that question longer than I'm proud of. I pulled the evidence log next, the physical box, because paper doesn't lie the way memory does. Inside, the motel registration card, brittle at the corners, a photograph clipped to it, department issue, black and white, taken from a lobby camera the week she disappeared. I almost didn't look at the face. When I did, I had to sit down. It was mine. Younger, thinner, a different haircut. But mine, the way your own face is mine, even in a mirror you don't recognize the room around. Here's where I should tell you I laughed it off. I didn't. I've built a career on believing evidence over instinct, and the evidence, calmly, patiently, was telling me I already knew this woman. Better than that, it was telling me I was her. So who was I investigating exactly? The missing woman or myself? I want to be honest about the order of things, because a case file only means anything if the sequence holds. Clue 1, the handwriting. Clue 2, the photograph. Clue 3 came from records, the kind that don't lie even when the people attached to them would very much like them to. A fingerprint card, lifted from the motel room in the original investigation, filed and forgotten for 2 decades. I ran it against my own prints on a whim, half convinced the system would kick it back as an error. It didn't. 12-point match. Perfect. Pause here if you want, and guess what that means before I tell you. I did. I sat in that lab for 11 minutes before I let myself say it out loud, and even then I only said it to an empty room. I requested my own personnel file next, the one every officer has on record, birth date, prior addresses, next of kin. It was thin. Thinner than it should have been for someone with 15 years on the job. No childhood address before the age of 9. No school records before a transfer that arrives, fully formed, with no institution of origin. A birth certificate that had clearly been reissued, not filed fresh, the paper stock 2 years newer than the date printed on it. Every detective learns to read a document for what's missing as much as what's there. Mine was missing a childhood. I stopped bringing the file into the bullpen after that. I told my partner it had gone cold again, not worth the desk space. That's the first lie I've told on this job in 15 years, and it came out easier than it should have. If a case can make you lie to protect it, doesn't that already tell you something about what the case really is? I went further. I requested the sealed juvenile court records for the county where Mara Lindqvist's case originated. The kind you need 3 signatures and a judge's blessing to open. The kind I only got open because I still, technically, outrank the objection. Inside was a name change petition, 23 years old, filed on behalf of a minor. The name being changed from Mara Lindqvist. The name being changed to the one I've answered to my entire adult life. I remember exactly nothing about signing that petition. I was told at the time I was 9. Here's the part of the file that stopped reading like a cold case and started reading like a mirror. The petition cited danger to the minor as cause for sealing, danger specific enough that a judge signed off without a hearing. No further detail survived in the unsealed portion. Someone, a long time ago, decided that whatever happened to Mara Lindqvist was dangerous enough that she needed to stop existing cleanly on paper in order to survive it. So the missing person I'd been assigned to find had never been missing at all. She'd been protected. Into oblivion, but protected. Doesn't it change everything once you realize the victim and the runaway were never two separate people to begin with? I went back through the physical evidence one more time after that, slower. The way you're trained to walk a scene you've already covered and clearly missed something in. A motel clerk's statement from the original file, typed decades ago, described a girl who kept glancing at the door like she was counting exits. That's not a runaway's habit. That's a survivor's habit. I've done exactly that my entire career without once asking myself where I learned it. I sat with the caseboard for 3 days after that, moving pins I'd already moved once as someone else, in a life I don't remember living. And here's the midpoint. The place where a case usually cracks wide open, and instead, mine folded quietly inward. I wasn't reopening someone else's disappearance. I was reopening my own, from the outside, with none of the memory that should have made it easy. Tracking down a caseworker from an informal, off-book protection program isn't like finding an ordinary witness. There was no personnel file with her real name on it, no forwarding address, nothing filed under a title that would surface in a normal search. I found her the slow way, the way you find anyone who's spent decades trying not to be found. Pension records cross-referenced against retirement dates, 3 phone numbers that led nowhere, 1 utility bill that hadn't changed hands in 19 years. I needed one more name. Whoever filed that name change on behalf of a 9-year-old had to still exist somewhere, in some record, under some title. I found her 3 days later, retired, 81 years old, living 2 hours north, under a name that had also, quietly, once been something else. She'd been a caseworker for a witness protection program, so informal it never earned an official acronym, the kind stitched together out of favors between one sympathetic judge, one quiet precinct, and people who needed to vanish faster than any system was built to move. I sat across from her kitchen table and told her who I used to be. She already knew. She'd been waiting, she said, for someone to finally ask. She poured 2 cups of coffee before either of us said another word. I remember thinking that was either kindness or stalling. It turned out to be both. Then she told me, plainly, the way you'd read a case summary out loud, exactly what had been done to a 9-year-old girl, and why nobody was ever supposed to connect that girl to me. Here's the climax, and here's where I'd tell you to brace yourself if I hadn't already spent the whole file bracing myself for you. Mara Lindqvist was 9 years old and the only witness to something her own father did, something bad enough that 3 separate agencies quietly agreed the paper trail needed to disappear faster than any trial could move. Not because she'd done anything, because staying findable was the danger. They didn't just relocate her. They erased the girl entirely and built a new one from scratch, a new birth certificate, a new hometown, a new childhood on file that never happened anywhere except in the paperwork. She grew up. She joined the force that, decades later, would hand her the file on the girl she used to be, and nobody in that chain of command had any idea they'd done it, because the whole point of the system was that nobody was supposed to know. I asked her the question I'd been circling since the fingerprint match. Why me? Why give the case to the one detective in the building who couldn't possibly close it objectively? She said nobody gave it to me. I requested it. Some part of me, some buried, unexplainable instinct, had been circling my own disappearance for years without ever letting the rest of me in on it. Cases I'd requested before, cold files with thin childhoods and clean paper trails, always a little too clean. I'd been investigating myself for longer than I knew, one file at a time, and just never gotten close enough before to notice. So here's the resolution, and here's the part I didn't see coming even after everything else. I asked her for my original name's full history, everything, start to finish, because a case file isn't closed until every prior page is accounted for. She hesitated before she answered, which told me more than the answer did. I filed the case as solved. Subject located, alive, no further action required. The same language I've used to close 100 other files that ended so much worse than this one somehow gets to. I didn't put my own name in the report as the subject. I don't know yet if that's protecting the department or protecting myself, and, for once, I'm not in a hurry to find out which. Mara Lindqvist wasn't the first name either. There was one before it, sealed under a different jurisdiction, a different age, a different reason. Whatever I witnessed as a child wasn't the only time this had happened to me. It was the second. I have been made to disappear before, and made new, at least twice, and I have no memory of either girl I used to be, only the paperwork they left behind for a version of me patient enough to eventually go looking. I closed the file the way I close every file, with a summary for the record. Case 4471, subject not deceased. Subject not missing. Subject reclassified, alive, present, sitting in this chair, having read her own case notes back to herself for the first time in 23 years. I still don't know what came before Mara. That file, if it exists, hasn't found me yet. But I've learned enough about myself to know exactly what I'll do next. I'll request it. I always do. The case file was 23 years old, and the handwriting in the margins was mine. I know now it always was. I just hadn't caught up to myself yet.